Welcome to Mavens of Data. This week we're speaking with Sadie St, founder of HMCI. Here, Sadie shared how analysts can stay relevant in the age of automation. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Sadie. I am so excited that you came to join us today. And just for anyone who is here who does not already know and follow you, can you give us an idea of your background?
Yes, happy to. Thank you so much for having me, Kristen. Reading through the announcements, I'm like, man, we got a jam-packed episode today. We have so much good ground to cover. I'm super excited. So thanks so much again for having me. And just a little bit about my background. I have been working in the AI and data science space for 10 years, which actually it may almost be 11 years now. And I like the joke that Chip said, which is before it was called AI, it was called ML, right? So before I worked
Yeah.
in AI, I worked in ML. So I was back in those days when we worked in ML, we started in R, seen all of those tools and really got my teeth set in healthcare. And so led a data science team in healthcare, really fell in love with leading large scale analytics and AI transformation, did AI strategy for Accenture. And like many people in the tech space, I have ADD. And so I can't do one thing at a time. So love to teach. I teach with UC Davis and Coursera, LinkedIn Learning. I've now trained almost 700,000 people with my classes. So I just love the skill of the internet. It allows you to do incredible things. And through that journey, like many people, found that there weren't a lot of women in this space, particularly in the data and AI space. So founded an organization called Women in Data. It grew to be a 50 or 70,000 individual organization with people in 55 countries with a mission to increase diversity in data careers. And today, now I am on my second company, the Human Machine Collaboration Institute, or HMCI for short, because that's a mouthful. And our whole focus is research and development in how humans can best collaborate with machines. So that's from an AI, robotics, and our moonshot goal is to develop a unified theory of consciousness. And I believe that AI and robotics is going to get us there. So I've had just so much fun working in this space. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm so excited to dive into some of these topics today.
That's awesome. Yeah. And we're going to be talking about how humans and machines are collaborating. And so to sort of start off, when we're thinking about AI as a teammate rather than a tool, what does that mean to you and how does that change the conversation?
Yeah, so we've done with HMCI, we've done hundreds of trainings for individuals on how to best collaborate with AI. And we do research on what are the use cases that individuals can use AI for. And one of the common problems that we saw for individuals using AI is today how we work, particularly as knowledge workers, like working on a computer, we have applications for specific things, right? We use Word or Google Docs to write a document. We use Excel if we want to do sheets, right? So we have particular applications for particular tasks, right? It's like one task equals one application. It's not a one-to-one, but it's close, right? It's in a family and group. What we found though is when you start to work with these multimodal models like ChatGPT and Gemini, they can do so much. We oftentimes don't tap into their full capabilities. And so, what I found helpful in shifting that conversation for people was having them think of it as a coworker, right? Of having them think of it as like an assistant. And I like to think of it as a really, really brilliant graduate assistant, right? They probably know more than me in a lot of areas because they're fresh out of school. But they don't understand the context of my business or my role. And that's what I have to do. I have to share with this tool my context, but they have so much more knowledge than me. And what I found is like sharing that with individuals just helps shift their mindset from a tool base where it's a task and a tool to be like, hey, what if I put kind of a persona or role on this of an incredible graduate students? Maybe it's my business advisor. Maybe it's my content creation advisor, right? Maybe it's an intern that helps me make some of these things. They were able to expand the task of what they were able to do so much faster with just a simple mindset shift.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And so when we think about, everyone's talking about who AI is going to replace. And we hear Bill Gates giving his opinion, and we give everyone giving, oh, I love your henna. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, we keep hearing about who AI might replace. Like from the perspective of this is a coworker, do you think about that in terms of, you know, where we which coworker is it, right? Like who do we maybe need less of? Is there any reduction in teams? Like how do you see sort of where this coworker is going to sit in the org?
Yeah, so anytime we get into the replacement conversation, and this happens a lot, I think it happens a lot because we're looking for clickbait news, right? Bill
Yep.
Gates said it's going to replace this, or so and so said it's going to replace that. And so part of it is the problem with our news cycle and trying to get clicks and views. But the big problem with the argument of what it's going to replace is the fact that we think that work is a finite object, right? So we think that there's only so much work to go around. And so if it's in a box, we only have space enough for maybe me and a couple other people. But the reality is work is not a finite measurement. And we've seen that with other industrial revolutions where, you know, the amount of food we're able to produce today because of engines, because of farming, because of manufacturing and genetic has expanded. And it's been fantastic. It's allowed us to feed more people cheaper. So I think the biggest problem with just even having the conversation of who will AI replace is we have to stop thinking that work is finite and that like we're going to do all the work and then it's just going to end and we're going to die. But if we go back to physics, actually, we know that the universe is continuing to expand. Like that's the one thing we know is that our whole universe is continuing to expand. And I think those principles come down to a macro level as well, which is like the work that we're doing is continuing to expand. So I think the key is not thinking about, oh, is work finite or will it replace? It's we have to ask the question, how is work continuing to change? And then how am I going to continue to change and evolve as the universe evolves, as everything around us is continuing to evolve? And so that's my big thing is like, how do we shift the conversation?
Yeah, no, right. And this is something that we've seen for a long time. And I've only been in data for 15 years, so I can't comment before that. But I remember specific moments like when I was at Vistaprint and we got access to Adobe Analytics for site tracking. And then all of a sudden, it became a lot easier to manage these massive data sets that it took a long time to run these queries. It took a long time to wrangle this data, and now we could get it with a couple points and clicks. And I remember thinking like, oh, hey, is this going to maybe cause a reduction in workforce because it things are measurably easier. It takes measurably less time to do these things. And that's not the only tool that I've seen over the span of my career where it's like, now we've got a new tool. We've talked a lot about low code, no code, or whatever. And the truth is that we've had point and click tools since like the 60s, right? And we've been using that. Like that wasn't a new, and this almost feels like a new, like, low code sort of solution. We're using it to create code that we now don't have to write all the lines ourselves, and we can put that in there and we can continue to build our solutions. And so, yeah, so I do see it as similarly, right? It empowers us to work on bigger initiatives, to get through that huge backlog that's never ending, that no one ever talks about. That is that like so much stuff doesn't get prioritized, right? And instead we're talking about firing people, and it's like, no, how about we think bigger, we grow bigger, we be bigger. And so I'm really excited for that, but I do get nervous with all the talk. It's like, if you stop hiring junior developers, then will there eventually be no senior developers, right? Like where do those people come from? And so I do think that it's a huge positive in the way that it's going to enable us to really make moves forward, to be quicker, to be, smarter, but also, I don't always trust choices that companies are going to make.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about you, Kristen, but I mean, like, I'm not doing any less work. I really thought that, like, oh man, AI is gonna come. When ChatGPT came out, what was it, 2, 3 years ago now? I was like, wow, I'm gonna have so much more time. If anything, I'm busier now than ever. So,
Mhm.
I think maybe to a problem, the work is not going to end. But I think what I hope to communicate to people is this is the most exciting time because it's a platform shift, right? Just as we shifted to mobile and then shifted to cloud. We're shifting to a new platform, and that enables new roles, right? The shift to mobile enabled roles like content creation, right? And being a content creator and being an influencer. Who knows what now this new platform shift of shifting to AI is going to enable? But I hope that just gets people excited. It means that like there's opportunities to follow your passion and follow your curiosity, and you could be the person who kind of paves that path in the new platform shift.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, this is the most exciting time in my data life. And I thought it was the most
Same.
exciting, like, 8 or 9 years ago when they were saying data science is going to be the sexiest job of the 21st century. I was like, wow, I'm riding this wave. This is amazing. And then, this right here, since ChatGPT came out and started really revolutionizing how we work, and it really brought data mainstream in like to the next level, and a level that was much higher than just talking about data science as the sexiest job in the 21st century, which did drive a bunch of people into data. But this is a scale that is just so much bigger um, than even that was. And so another thing I'd like to touch on, so I know you have thoughts, and I honestly hadn't thought previously about as much about how, AI and working with AI as a coworker is going to change blue collar jobs versus white collar jobs. But I would love to hear your, thoughts on that and sort of like the differences in impact.
Yeah, I'm curious to kind of pressure test with you too because you've been in this space for a long time. Like I remember when I got into it, the big thing was like Target can, predict if someone's pregnant, right? Like
Pregnant.
that was the big like news case was like everyone was like, "Oh, what are we going to do with analytics and predictive analytics?" Right? But when I got into the space, I think the common thread was like, yes, we're going to use automation, we're going to use analytics, we're going to use AI, and we're going to automate some tasks. And I think it was from what I got from like the surrounding environments was that it was first going to come into like blue collar jobs, right? It was going to go into manufacturing. We do have robots in manufacturing today. They're for
Mhm.
particular tasks. And I think this is part of a fault to like the creators in this space is we kind of sit on like this high tower. What I call it is like the high priestess of data science and AI, and like it will never come for me or never come for my job. And what we found is the thing that we're actually really good at automating is what we do, right? Which is like doing the coding and doing the data munging and cleanup. And so there's been a shift that I've really seen, particularly with the release of LLMs, is we've seen that, oh, it's actually really good at knowledge work, right? Kind of the more of the white collar work versus the blue collar jobs. And what I've started to see is there's a lot of myths that we've had about AI that are shifting. The other one that we saw is a lot of people, I felt like, talked about how it would never be a great companion, right? It would be hard to express emotion. It would be hard to have it would be hard to have that type of companionship. And from last year to this year, we have seen a new recent study from Harvard Business Review came out. I could find it and put it in the chat. People are shifting from using it for tasks for work and using it more for therapy, companionship, and coaching, right? And again, I love being able to change my mind. Another myth I had, right? It was like, okay, we can never create a tool or an AI. It's not going to shine at those things. And so I share all that to say we really have to go back and test a lot of our assumptions, because for
Mhm.
me, a lot of my assumptions I had were wrong, and I think they're going to continue to be wrong. And so I just encourage people to go back and retest our assumptions. But back to knowledge work versus, blue collar work, what we're going to see is right now we're essentially building the brain, right? So we're building the brain that's going to go into the robot, which is the body, and that then will affect more of the blue collar jobs. We're starting to see some really cool things happening with robotics in construction. They're making a lot of progress on that side. I think even things like robotics within even childcare, right? There's a big opportunity for what can happen there. So it's all going to converge and merge, but I just encourage people to pressure test a lot of their assumptions, because I've had to change my mind on certain things, and I think it's a positive
Mhm.
thing.
Mhm. Yeah. And so when I think about it, one of the things that I think about, my friends that are in blue collar work, they love their trade. They're skilled at their trade. What they don't love is managing their books, doing the administrative work. And I would love to see a world where we're able to, automate the things that maybe people don't love about their job, that are more just the means to the end. I have to do this to have a business that, allows them to hopefully, like, make smarter decisions. I feel like, so I certainly, when I started working on my own, had no, very few mentors and not a lot of experience with things around contracts and
Mm.
the things that you do when you start a business that you just don't learn as part of your 9 to 5 job. And so that's personally what I would love to see at the moment. And just one thing, when you talk about, um, like automation and how we're going towards automation, that was always the goal, right? Like even
Mhm.
15 years ago, it was, if you have to do something twice, automate it. So we've like always been doing that. We're just automating things a lot faster than we have been previously. So,
Yeah, I think the same thing
yeah,
is, I love what you said. If you have to do something twice, right, automate it. But I think the whole thing that still exists is, we we want to automate the things that we don't enjoy doing. And I think that's one area we can all agree on is like you mentioned, even blue collar work or white collar work, it doesn't matter. We all have parts of our job we don't enjoy. And then there's
yeah.
parts of our job we do. And my whole goal is like, how do I get rid of the things I don't enjoy and do more of the things that I do enjoy? And I'm really hoping that agents is where we'll shine with those tasks.
Yeah. And then are there certain places where you think that it's going to be easier to achieve that goal, whether it's in like a certain org or for a certain type of role where these AI changes are really going to allow a position to thrive versus automating the things that we really wanted to be doing ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people probably saw the famous meme last year. I think it was a quote from a news article which was like, AI came out and, I wanted it to do my dishes and I wanted it to, do my administrative work, and here it is, it's over here creating beautiful art, and it's like that's what I wanted to do. Right.
Yep.
So that's, that went viral for a lot of reasons, but I think we should look at it a little bit differently, which is, for me, I like to do art, but I'm not a great realistic artist, so I enjoy using AI because it gives me the capability to do more realistic art, right, to bring those visions to life. For somebody who has that skill, they may not want to do that, right? And we've seen that in chess, right? We know that AI is so much better at chess. Even world champions cannot beat AI in chess, but yet we still play AI. Right. And that, I think, is something that we're still going to continue to see. We're going to continue to see where AI is better than us in a lot of areas. And we may do it just because we do it for the love of it, right? We want something handcrafted. We enjoy that. And probably
Mhm.
we as humans are going to pay more money for things that are created by humans versus things that are created by AI. We see that today with buying clothes, right? When you know where it comes from, or buying food from a farmer. We're willing to pay a little bit more to have that personal connection. And so I think that's only going to continue with AI. Where can we look for things that can be automated? Again, I think it comes back to removing your assumptions because it changes so quickly. We're on, 3-month release cycles right now from the major AI companies. So something that you thought couldn't be done 3 months ago, check back in 3 months and it may be possible today. And then when I tell people it's going to be different for everyone, but for me, I'm continually writing what parts of my job do I not enjoy and how do I get rid of them. And I have my team go through the same exercise each year. We do like a matrix grid about like high value task, low value task, and like where we find joy. Now, we all can't get rid of the things that we don't like, but it's a great exercise that we all do every year to say, how do we either offboard some of this to, contract that out, or how do we automate some of these tasks as well? And so that's what I encourage people to do is do it for yourself first, put your own mask on first, and then do it for your team, and then do it for your organization.
Yep, absolutely. No, and I saw the, art thing when I was trying to find an illustrator for my book, and I joined all these groups, and there's a lot of people now who are offering the service of creating AI images to make a children's book, and it is not well received by the artist community. And I think that there's still a lot of ways that we have to go there because it's difficult to get the figure to have a consistent look and really show the right emotion that you're trying to convey. But I think even after that is figured out, I think that there's still going to be a lot of pushback in terms of, people want that homemade art feeling. And I know I went with a traditional illustrator as well. And even on the, washing the dishes thing that you mentioned, I literally said that in a podcast. The host asked me, what are you most excited about with AI? And I was like, I'm still waiting for a robot to do my dishes. And I got off and I felt bad because I was like, was that wicked sarcastic? But like, no, really.
Yeah.
That's what I'm in it for. Okay, so with all this talk around the way that careers are changing, if somebody is an analyst, how do they future-proof their career, right? Because it is different. 5 years ago, I was like, hey, I'm going to really keep my technical skills up. I'm going to focus on that. I'm going to be like the best at Python. And now it's like, maybe I didn't need to go quite that deep, right? Like maybe it's like slightly different, but what are your thoughts on how things are changing and how somebody prepares themselves to have an awesome career?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think there's just core principles that will never change no matter what happens in technology. And one that I've always found is like following your own curiosity is key, right? Because this is where I love diversity is everybody is coming in with a different perspective, a different experience that they're bringing to the table. And so I just want everybody who's listening right now to think about that and remember that it's like you have something unique inside of you. So follow your own curiosity because that's probably going to lead us in a path to create the new that hasn't been discovered yet. So we need that. So number one, follow your curiosity. Number two, in terms of analytics in particular, what I'm seeing happen is, yes, we don't have to, it doesn't take as much time to do the manual hard skills, right? So the coding, the actual analysis, we have amazing tools that help support us to do that. You still need to learn those skills, but we have tools that make it a lot faster. So if that becomes faster and faster, the hard skills, then the soft skills are where you're going to really have to focus. And on the soft skill side, what you're going to really want to focus on is how does what I'm analyzing or what I'm doing with data and AI, how is it going to impact the business? And the better that you can get on that, and the better you can be on being a translator to say, hey, this is what we need. These are the changes we need to make in our business. Or this is a new solution I came up with that's going to help this product. The more you can really understand the business, you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
really, really hard to get rid of, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because anybody can come in and do some analysis, but when you apply that to the business and can translate it to the executive team and know how to read a P&L statement and understand the finances of the business, you're really going to be unstoppable. So stay curious, keep learning, just general. You'll be fantastic in your career if you keep doing that. But as an analyst, make sure that you're switching your skill set to really understand the business and focus on the business.
Yeah, I love that. And I think about it as like a way to position yourself as a partner, right? Rather
Mhm.
than like a task taker. Because if somebody asks you for something and then you have that view of, okay, well, you asked me for this, but actually I know that we're spending a ton of money. We're spending $20 billion, whoa, not 20 billion, $20 million a year on, media spend, and we haven't optimized that. Like, hey, have we thought about that yet? And like really thinking about, just going above your little spot, and being able to look at the business holistically and where you'd be able to insert yourself and make improvements on your own. And I do want to go back and mention that, like, when I said I was focusing on Python, coding is still important. You
Yeah.
should still probably learn how to code. I got in the trap of, going and learning a bunch of different stuff. I could already code. But there's like a shiny new tool every other week, and chasing the shiny tools is not going to be the differentiator for sure.
Agreed.
Okay, awesome. So I would love to switch gears and talk a little bit. So you built up Women in Data, and then you were able to exit. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey? I know it took you like a year and a half to actually make this exit. What sort of fueled that decision? Was it, specifically because you wanted to start your new venture, or just give me all the details because I want to hear about this.
Yeah, so I will say Women in Data is a nonprofit. It's a 501(c)(3). So exiting it is a little bit different. I don't own anything. I look at no, it's okay. I was just more I call myself a steward, or I was like its main gardener, right? So that's the way that I like to look at it. And I trained a new gardener to come in. But I still come back to the garden, I'll say that. Yeah, so with Women in Data, I when I started it, I in my head just was like, after 10 years, like I need to do something else. And I think sometimes I look back and I'm like, man, I really love younger Sadie. Like younger Sadie had some really smart ideas. And I think the idea was from that is like I was going to fall in love with it. And I knew that it's good to bring in new ideas and new people to come in and take over. And so I kind of just put this marker in my head that when I started it, that I really wanted to have somebody else come in. And about 8 years in, I came back from a data journey. So we had events in all of our regions across the globe. I got to really like connect with the community. And it just felt like this really, I don't know, like this bow on top of a really, really incredible journey for me. And at that time, I was just, my heart was being called back into research and development. And so it just really felt like the stars were lining. It was time for me to do something new. But as I'd also accomplished what I wanted to in Women in Data, which is build this global community and platform for learning and development. So it just felt like a great time. The problem is that I didn't realize is once you found something, you can't just go like, peace, see you, like, hope you're going to take care of it, team. Yeah, there has to be a whole transition plan, a whole succession plan. And so that's really what took about a year and a half. I talked with the board. The board was extremely supportive. We determined, hey, we need to build out some more committees and support. We went through a long executive search. And so all of that process took roughly a year and a half to go through, just in terms of making that transition and the training. But very happy with the transition, had an incredible individual, and I'm just so grateful for the board and the community, the support. I think Women in Data is going to be stronger now than ever. And most importantly, I get to go on and do something new and create something new. So really excited what we're building at HMCI and the research and development we're doing there as well.
And I want to hear about that too. But so I didn't realize that you had been with Women in Data or had been building Women in Data for 10 years. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you made that choice that you were going to build something that obviously you needed to give so much of your time and attention to? This was very early in your career. Like, that feels like a very bold move. Like, where did you get the inspiration to be like, I'm gonna really, go after this? And just I hate saying young because I don't know how people feel about their, but like
Yeah.
you were very
Yeah,
early in
I
your
was a baby. I was
career.
25 years old. Okay.
Yeah,
I don't care
yeah.
sharing ages. I think it's just helpful. Now I was a
Building
baby and I look back. So I'm like, okay, this
building
is
big
great.
things, building big things. Yeah. Like, can you just tell us how you sort of made that decision that you were going to invest so much like love and time in this?
And this really, I think, goes back to what I share with people, which is follow your passion and follow your curiosity. And we can say big things now, 10 years later, but when it started, we were just a small local community and chapter, right? Only 3 people showed up to our first ever event, right? And I was so grateful for that, right? So that's why I tell people to follow your passion and curiosity, because you never know what it's going to turn into as long as you stay consistent. And that's the one thing that I will give my younger self a ton of credit for, is just the consistency that I had within Women in Data. When I led the first chapter, we met every single month, right? And we spoke. When sometimes we couldn't find a speaker, I was like, okay, I'll give a talk on something that I've been learning, right? And so having that consistency is really key. And you can build and do great things when you have that consistency. But yeah, it really just comes down to following your passion, following your curiosity, and then staying consistent with it. Don't give up even in the hard times, because that is where you'll get the richness, you'll get the work, and that's when you'll, 10 years later, start to see some incredible fruit and some incredible results. And you'll get to grow a garden and a grove. So it's really cool.
Hey, and so when you were making the decision to move from Women in Data, did you already know that you were going to start HMCI, or was there time in between? And then, yeah, like, tell me a little bit about building HMCI.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I didn't know what I was going to do next. And that was also a really weird thing, is once you found a company, and I'm sure you know this, Kristen, which is it gets very entwined with your own identity. So you're like, okay, well, like if I'm not this anymore, who am I and what am I
I've
going
spent
to
time in
do?
therapy for that. Yeah.
A lot of time in therapy, yes. So I took 6 months to really figure out, like, what is next? Who am I and what do I want to do? I even considered going and, working for an organization again and doing something in corporate, and even interviewed with a couple different organizations, and really just didn't feel like that was the right fit for me or the right role where I could really do what I wanted and loved. And to be honest, I just fell in love with what was happening in the research space, but also saw an opportunity to do research differently. So today, about 60 cents for every dollar that gets sent in grants to a university doesn't go to the research lab. It actually goes to the university. And so they're taking a massive administrative fee. I really saw an opportunity to change how that is done. I also think there's an opportunity to bring more people into science, to bring more people into research. Again, to remove, just as like data science had it, was this high priestess of data science, there's also this high priestess of research where you can't be a part of it, or you can't do it unless you have particular titles. And I think it's more about the work that you produce and what you're able to share in that work and the new discoveries versus the title you're associated with. So I got really, really passionate about these areas and was like, yeah, I think I want to start a research institute, and I think I want to do things differently. And I think we're going to do some really cool things that are going to help humanity progress forward. And once I get the idea in my head, then there's no turning back,
Look
So
out. Look out.
like once it's in my head, I'm like, oh, great, now I have to do this. So
Oh my God, that's absolutely beautiful. So I think we're getting to the point where it's time to head over to Q&A. I just want to ask one more question. if you could give a piece of advice to analysts today, if you could only give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's simple. Just stay curious and keep learning. I mean, that's what
Mhm.
makes a great analyst is someone who is insatiably curious. And, don't be afraid to be curious. I think that's the other side I would mention is sometimes you may have the question in your head, but you're afraid to ask the question that you're going to get in trouble. And that's really where I'd encourage everybody to push into. But stay curious and keep learning.
Absolutely. And we are going to go over to Q&A. Um, so we'll look at this first. Let's see what's upvoted. So Daniel asked, isn't the pace at which people are learning AI today outpacing companies' ability to adapt?
This is a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have brought this up a couple times with leaders when I go and talk to organizations, which was this was one of the only times I've personally seen where the employees forced the leadership to change because of a new technology. So typically, new technology comes out and leadership's like, okay, we're all moving to SharePoint, right? Or we're all moving to the cloud. And it's a very top down type of initiative. What I saw with AI, though, was very different. It was like employees were using it and leadership realized, oh, we actually need a policy or we need guidelines or we need to understand how we're going to integrate this in. And so, yes, I have seen that time and time again where it's really now employees are kind of leading the way and it's forcing leadership to react and to change.
I think from my perspective, it's very similar to what we've already seen, right? Because I remember 10 years ago talking about we saw Amazon just being really great at being able to recommend products, which is right product recommendation. They were already using ML techniques. You signed into Amazon, they knew who you were, they knew who your past purchases were, and not other companies were not that savvy yet. Other
Mhm.
companies were not keeping up. And so, 10 years ago, we were talking about like, hey, we need to be able to improve personalization, but they didn't have the data infrastructure. They weren't able to get it prioritized because it would have been such like a big lift. I mean, we're obviously we've come a long way in 10 years, but I just feel like I've always seen this lag. And even when I was building an LLM powered app for a consultancy, it's like we know what we want to do, but it takes us a while to implement it. And that's always sort of been the issue, but the scale is just so much bigger now because we have, more ideas, more opportunities. And then at the same time, it seems like companies are trying to let people go as well. So at odds. Okay. This question is from Jade. So you said focus on the business aspects. Does that mean business intelligence analysts will be the most in demand?
I don't know where we're comparing kind of who is in demand to, right? I think it'd be hard to say. Kristen, you look like you want to say something.
Well, yeah, no, I think so. My understanding of the question is like, and so Jade, you can let us know if I'm making this up, but of the data roles where you're
Mhm.
saying that the business acumen is so important, she's saying, does that mean that like business intelligence would be a good bet for where to try and go if you were looking for a role?
Yeah, I think in terms of like the data roles and the data family roles, I think probably one of the most in demand ones that's going to continue to exist is data engineering. And that is just particularly because we need people building the pipelines. There's more and more data that we want to connect together. Things break, the data's messy. So to me, I always look at it as data engineering is probably going to be one of the most in demand data roles. I think on the business intelligence analyst side, that I can see more of that role even just going into actual business domain roles, right? So as the tools get easier and easier, the marketer can just do their own and analytics. The financial um, analyst is doing their own, right? So I think that role will change, and I'd focus more on data engineering if you just are like, hey, I want a really in-demand role.
Yeah, no, I sort of see it too, similarly as like the pipeline getting smaller. So like data
Hmm.
scientists are going to just be expected to be better with business in addition, right? Like the bar might just become a little bit higher for everyone's business skills across the data roles.
I agree.
So Bargavi, does that mean domain will become very important when we apply for jobs? If we happen to switch industry, how should we market ourselves in the interview?
Yes, I do think that domain is going to be even more and more important. So I'm part of the OpenAI forum, one of the community leads in there, and talk about how they've developed models that are so good in a particular domain area, they have to bring in domain experts to evaluate them, right? So
Mhm.
it's not a matter anymore where it's like, oh, I just anybody can come in and evaluate this model because we're just trying to get base knowledge. No, domain expertise is becoming more and more important. And that's even happening in business roles because remember how I talked about using it as a coworker, you have to share that context. So if you have a lot of domain context, you're going to be a power user with AI. If you're switching industries, how do you then you're going to have to lean heavy on your tech skills, right? But show interest in that industry, right? So
Mhm.
you can attend conferences in that industry and talk about, how you're networking with people in that industry and read about it, read books. A lot of times having the domain expertise is actually just knowing the key words, right? Knowing, oh, this is what this acronym used for, right? Why do data people call it SQL but spell it SQL, right? Like how does that happen? Those silly little things that happen. So that's what I would say is yes, it'll be important, but you can still learn it and lean into that side.
I agree. So I've hopped industries 4 times, and
Oh, wow.
yeah, no, I am an industry hopper. I love learning about new industries. I found it fascinating. I think it is, easier at the lower levels you have to be a subject matter expert to sort of be to really climb the ladder and get higher. And it's even more important now that, right, like before we could lean on our tech skills even more. And
Mhm.
now the expectations are a little different. So agree. From Hiba, do you think that people occupying certain jobs will be obliged to do career shifts to adapt?
I do think so. Like I mentioned, we have to look at things as a continuum, right? And so we all are going to have to continue to update our skills, and shift over time. What I mean, personally, my whole workflow has changed completely because of AI. The tools I use have changed. I reevaluate my workflow every 3 to 6 months, right? Where I'm like, hey, is there a new tool that I should be using? Is there something I need to be updating and changing? So the best way is to think about it as a continuum. And I don't think that it'll be such an abrupt change of like, okay, your job is now officially ending and you need to shift to this completely new thing, right? If you're continuing to learn, it will be a much easier transition for you. Will have, if that happens to you where you're like, your job's over and this now has changed, you will have had your blinders on, right? So again, be smart. If you're starting to see signs of like, oh, they're wanting us to learn these tools or these tools, definitely raise your hand, sign up for that because it should be a continual and gradual change. I mean,
Perfect.
what do you think, Kristen? Do you think that more people are going to have to adapt and shift?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how it's always been, just at a different scale, right? Like we've gotten new tools, um, I was an R programmer, and then at one point everyone was saying that I had to deliver things in Python, and so now I'm a
Yeah.
Python programmer, and like that's just, and so the role has changed tremendously. I also started doing econometric time series analysis and forecasting, and then I realized that the money was actually in general analytics, and so I made more money doing stuff that was less technical. And it was just, that was, I shifted because that was where the money was and that's where I was going. So, but yeah, I think we're going to see it on like a wider scale. And so we have one last question. This is just a classic. Arshadul asked, is it a requirement to possess a master's degree or a PhD to establish a successful career as a data scientist?
I would say definitely not, particularly on the PhD side of things. If anything, you probably you definitely don't need it. But what I would recommend is it also depends on the type of work you want to do. So if you want to do research, it's really helpful to have that. If you want to work in a research lab, that it is helpful for that side of things. But is it necessary? Definitely not. I mean, Kristen, are you saying I'm finally not starting to see it removed from job descriptions even too.
Yeah, no, I have seen that as well. I know people who have been hired from boot camps. I had another point and now I forgot it. But I do think it is definitely shifted. I also think that if you like build some killer portfolio projects and you ramp up your personal branding, like there will be people in
Hmm.
your DMs saying like, hey, we, have a need. And of course you have to do that well. I don't want to make that sound like it's easy, but there are options that didn't exist 10 years ago that we have available now. One of the best analysts that I worked with had their degree in psychology, just a bachelor's degree. So it wasn't a STEM degree. And, so there are options. Is it probably easier still in this day to go to the traditional route and get a STEM degree and potentially a STEM master's? I'm gonna have to say yes. Like I think that is still that the traditional route is still the easiest way to go, but that we do have more options now for alternative ways to get in than we did before.
I agree. I think
Right.
what's interesting is the misconception I had was that I was going to get my master's in it and bam, I was going to be a data scientist. I was going to get the title. I was going to get the job. I would just say going down the education route does not guarantee a job, right? And I think
No.
that's something though, just to know is yes, you're going to have curated education for you, but you have to do the work. And what I mean by do the
Mm,
work is like not just put in the hours and do the work, but like you have to do the work of being a data scientist to get the job. And I think, and that you can do with a degree or without a degree.
no, it's really so multifaceted, right? Because even so, like obviously, Maven Analytics can teach you to do all of these skills. And if you were to go to an online university where you're not interacting with your advisors, you're not going to like the career fairs on site, there's probably not extra benefit there to like having that degree where, I mean, from my perspective, in a lot of ways, the in-person degree benefits you in the way that like you're going to those career fairs, you're like collaborating and networking with actual people that are going to have connections, and that's one of the differences that is a difference from online learning. But like, you don't need a university to learn the actual skills because the skills can be learned in a lot of different areas. All right, awesome. So that was the last question. Sadie, thank you so much. I particularly loved hearing about your experience with women in data and HMCI, and I appreciate so much you coming on today. So, all right, guys, thank you for joining. I hope you found this as fun as I did, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thanks, Kristen.
Bye. Thank you so much, Sadie.